Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, saying it right. I used to get frustrated when people spelt my name wrong, because there's no H in John. But imagine when most of the world keeps pronouncing your capital city wrongly. A discussion with Kate Saunders. Kate is the Communications and Engagement Manager at the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, IPSA, and I managed to talk to Kate for 12 minutes without referring to any of the recent governmental, shall we say, issues. And question of the week. Whose job is it anyway? Should the introvert change or the team leader? But in the news recently, John Lewis. They're ditching the famous pledge, never knowingly undersold. Apparently, it's lost relevance due to online shopping. The pledge to refund the difference if a customer found the same item cheaper elsewhere didn't apply to online. So I'll be honest though and say, I never actually understood what it meant. Undersold? Didn't even know. A crocodile ate a dinosaur. Obviously something going on about language this week. I read dinosaur and think big. So a dinosaur eating crocodile must be wow! However, the dinosaur was a baby and smaller than a chicken. This is the first time that a crocodile has been discovered with a dinosaur remains in its stomach, said Dr. Matt White, who led the research. He added that the imaging techniques used to identify the embedded crocodile and its lunch could lead to further significant finds. Just interesting how we think about dinosaurs as much bigger than crocodiles. While I'm feeling linguistic though, and thinking about things in the news, I'm going to try and express something I've read. Many people have been pronouncing the capital of Ukraine wrongly, using a Russian pronunciation. According to the Guardian newspaper, Russian and Ukrainian are both East Slavonic languages, as opposed to West Slavonic languages like Poland or South Slavonic ones like Bulgarian. They all came from an original root but diverged, says Monica White, Associate Professor in Russian and Slavonic Studies at Nottingham University. The Ukrainian government mounted a campaign 4 years ago to secure international approval for the name of its capital city. I only wish it hadn't taken the horrendous recent events for me to hear about it. I've seen it written Kyiv, but never really understood that meant it needs to be pronounced differently. So, here we go. It should be pronounced as Kyiv, and I hope that I've said that right. It's Kyiv, not Kiev. Touching on something lighter. In the Sunday Times, I saw that pottering around doing nothing much, which is probably something which appeals to some people more than others, perhaps even introverts, but it's good for you. In fact, it's now provably good for you. Researchers at the University of California found that doing peaceful domestic things, a bit of gardening, cooking, even housework, can significantly reduce the risk of heart disease. You may not appear to be doing as much when you potter, but you are in fact ironing out your mind at the same time as making dinner, or at a leisurely pace, or seeing if the tulips have done what tulips do. So that's good news for potty, or was it pottering, introverts. I think it's definitely time to talk to Kate. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, John.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good. Have you recovered from the big business ski trip that we met on a couple of weeks ago?
I have. I was lucky on the injury side, and yeah, I'm fully rested after a lot of physical exercise. So yeah, it was good.
Now, the reason I ask is because I've talked about it a couple of times in recent episodes, and the whole introvert on a trip full of 60 odd people and the rest of it. So it's just kind of interesting to know your reflections on the trip, really.
Like you say, there's a lot of different characters in the group, big group, but you sort of find your pockets of conversation, don't you? And we were very lucky in our chalet that we were a bunch of conversationalists, I think, so we all got on very well.
Including introverted ones, which of course many people go, you can't be an introverted conversationalist. Oh, yes, you can, but there we go. So we're going to talk about this discussion around getting people involved in interviews, but also other types of conversation as well, like performance reviews, meetings. We started this off because we were talking about how important it is that interviewees also grill the interviewer. Before we dive into that, I've got one big question for you. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? And more importantly, what does that mean to you?
I describe myself as an introvert extrovert, but I'm probably more of an extrovert. I get a lot of energy from other people. I'm quite happy to respond quite quickly to things. I don't need to go away and gather myself all the time. But then at the same time, when it's coming up to social events or work events or networking and things like that, I can get to the door of somewhere and think, I can't possibly go in there and perform and engage. My energy can bottom out at that stage. But generally, if I can get over that, the sort of anxiety of it, then I'll go in there and then I will start getting my energy back again through the conversations I have with people.
That's quite interesting because you clearly thought about the definitions around there and the energy around people you mentioned, as well as this quick response thing, which is very common of most extroverts. And we're all somewhere on the spectrum between the two. None of us are this stereotypical one or the other. So you've then gone on and talk about your energy can drip down just before some of the events. But you also linked in the potentially anxiety thing in there.
Yeah, I guess it feels like anxiety when I am having a period like that where I don't feel like connecting with people. I don't feel like it's the right thing for me. And there's a lot of pressure then to go out there and perform. When you're asked a difficult question in a meeting and you don't know how to respond and you would much rather be given an hour to go away and formulate a response and come back and deliver something a bit more considered. Yeah, I guess you do have a bit of anxiety because I think, as we've said, you're operating in a world full of extroverts who sort of expect certain things from you.
That might be a really neat point to jump into the conversation we started to have about the effectiveness of interviews and how important it is for the interviewee to almost be grilling the other person. Tell us a bit more about that.
I'm not a perfect interviewee and no way an expert, but I do try and turn the tables in interviews in order to find out if the company I'm thinking of joining is right for me. I've been very lucky that the reason why I've done this in the last few interviews that I've had is because I have been genuinely happy at my current job. And I am genuinely trying to find out if the new place will fit the old place. But when it comes to questions, I'm not ticking off the sort of tick box is there training and development or anything like that. I want to look somebody square in the eye and say, what's the culture like? What will my line management be like? Will I fit? Will you fit me? Those kind of questions. I always want to meet a line manager before taking a position, just so that we know that we, have a rapport. That's really important. But I think so often in these conversations, they are sort of managed and the whole tone is set by the interviewer. And, 5 minutes at the end set aside for questions, but actually that should be a discussion between two equal parties deciding if that role and that position and that move is right for that person.
I love that. And I think what was so apparent as you were talking there was, as much as anything else, what really came across for me was the mindset thing. You went into that interview because you weren't desperate for a job. You were already in somewhere where you were happy. And that's, to me, is a mindset thing. And then you walked in with the mindset of, I am going to get what I want from this interview. And what I want is not this, I've got to ask a question, do I get training or whatever it is. I want to come out of this knowing that it's the right job for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose if you're not in that position, that lucky position of genuinely feeling like I will not move unless this company can convince me that they are right for me, then you do have to fake it till you make it and have that mindset. I mean, even if you're in a position that you do really want to move from, you don't want to jump out of the frying pan into the fire. So you should equally go into those conversations thinking, I need to really find out genuinely if they're right for me.
And I suppose in some ways that's kind of similar approach that you need to take with things like performance reviews. So you're going into a performance review, which historically have been run by the boss, if I can put it like that. And yet, this is possibly your only chance in the entire year to get what you want.
100%. And I used to work in a team and we all had our appraisals on the same day. And there'd be people bouncing out saying that, they've presented everything that they've done in the year and they've made demands and things like that. And then other people coming out thinking that they've just scraped by equally good colleagues, but feeling as if they've scraped by the skin of their teeth. It was just a different mindset, those meetings. And exactly as you say, those meetings are an opportunity to showcase what you've done over the year, to let your manager know how they've performed, and to proactively and productively talk about the year ahead and what you need from the year ahead as well. So yeah, that's definitely a mindset thing as well.
And interestingly there, you said that it was almost two sets of people go through the whole day. I'm just wondering, was it more introverts that were the kind of came out and scraped through it? Was the extroverted ones were bouncing out of it? Or am I being overly simplistic there?
I mean, I don't think it completely divides like that, but I would say the majority of the time, yeah, the extrovert were the ones bouncing out, and the introvert seeing it as more difficult naturally to sell themselves in that situation and to make demands from their bosses.
Which leads, of course, to the question or the topic: how do we help introverts to go into that, whether it's an interview for performance or whether it's an interview for a job or anything else? How do they go into that to take that control? What do we need to do for the mindset, and what can an introvert do to just grab it?
Yeah, I think for a lot of meetings with introverts, I think an agenda is good. And once you've got the agenda, if you have that time set aside for what you need, it's coming up, you can't skip it, you can't bail at the last minute and say, actually, I'm not going to talk about pay or progression or this or that. It's there on the agenda. But it's definitely, it's a mindset thing. I think what we said to the introverts in our team was, do you know that all of us, everybody else is going in there prepared to sell themselves, and you just won't compare favorably to us unless you sort of take the opportunity to showcase how brilliantly you worked over the last year and to ask for what you need. So there's a little bit of knowing what other people are doing, but also, just preparing for those conversations.
That's quite interesting, because if some are going in and really effectively selling themselves, I guess as a manager, as well as the person that's not selling themselves, you're going to see the quieter person as less effective, which, as you rightly pointed out, is not the case at all. However, if it's your one chance to sell yourself and you don't, are we talking about proactively shouty, ego waving, selling yourself? Or is this about going beforehand, preparing, knowing the things you want to cover, knowing the things where you go, I did this, I did this, I did this, and I did it well?
Absolutely. And I don't think that extroverts should change themselves in any way to become extrovert in order to blend in a corporate situation. But it's about having the confidence, presenting in your own way, presenting yourself, your case, your position. You can do that in so many different ways, in an understated way, but just so long as the message is communicated either in an interview or in a meeting about your worth, basically.
So in a sense, I used the C word and I said take control, but perhaps it's not that. Perhaps it's about going as an introvert, be prepared to facilitate the discussion in much the same way as having an introverted facilitator in departmental meetings, etc., can make a huge difference to the meeting, because you prepare for it beforehand, you listen to all the things that are going on, probably in more detail than some extroverts do, and therefore you can do a better job of it.
Yeah, that's it. Because we know that introverts and extroverts are equally good, equally smart, equally capable, all of that. But introverts, and in my case, when I'm feeling introverted, you just need that. You need that opportunity to engage and to be part of the conversation. And as I was saying, in our office, so we have a weekly team meeting with 100 people, and people chair the meeting on rotation. And we've had a wonderful mix of people. We've had the extroverts, funny, the loud, this and that, but we've also had wonderful introverts doing it in their own way and getting really good responses for people because they've been given the opportunity, they've been given the platform, they've been able to prepare, and they do just as good a job in their own way.
So I'm going to ask you two more questions. One is a tip for an introvert to take more control in an interview or a performance review.
As we've said, it's a mindset thing. Have a word with yourself, pull your shoulders back, fake it till you make it, but just believe that you have the right to be actively involved and to set the tone of the meeting.
Love it. But let's flip it the other way for a second, because I think there's a fair case to sit there and say, as a manager, as a leader, it's your job to get the most from the people you're interviewing or talking to. So could you share with us a tip for a non-introverted manager to help the introvert perform better in interviews or reviews?
I think, and I have nothing to base this on, but I suspect that introverts can get overlooked because they don't push themselves forward in general meetings and things like that. And I think that's a real miss on the part of facilitators. So to give everybody time to contribute. And when it comes to interviews and performance reviews and things like that, to give the person time to say what they want to say, don't bulldoze them and try and keep moving things forward until you're satisfied that that person has made their contribution.
Love it. Thank you. Kate, it's been wonderful to talk to you. And I'm absolutely sure that some of the listeners will go, oh, we want to get back in touch with Kate and talk about how she's done this. Is there a good way for them to do that?
Sure. They're very welcome to message me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And I'll share the URL on the sleeve notes for the podcast. Kate, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure, John. Thanks.
That was a fascinating discussion. Thank you, Kate. Main things I took from it. 1. Treat recruitment interviews as an opportunity to grill the interviewee, and that goes for introverts and extroverts. 2. Treat meetings as the place where you say what you want to say. And in both cases, preparing first is a good thing and an introvert's strength. 3. Interviewers. If you're to select the best person, make sure they get to ask what they want. Tell them up front, rather than just giving them the normal 24 seconds at the end of an interview. And 4, likewise, managers in performance discussions or meetings, you'll get the best from everybody when you help everybody to say what's important. And that's quite interesting because it leads straight on to Stephanie's question this week. What would you like to know about introversion in business? This week's question comes from Stephanie. Whose job is it anyway? Should the introvert change or the team leader? In meetings and other ways at work, is it the introvert's job to change and put themselves forward more forcefully? Or the leader's role to adapt things? Superb question. Thank you, Stephanie. Is the role of a manager not to get the best performance from the whole team? Does being introverted mean you don't have views and can't put yourself forward? No, absolutely not. However, it might mean that you are less likely to force yourself to a fore in a room full of ego-waving extroverts who don't allow you to break into the conversation. The internal processing gap and the people energy thing both make introverts less likely to force their way into the conversation unless they're very passionate about it. So, should they be more prepared to put their views forward? Possibly at times, yes. But, as the manager's role is to get the best team performance, that often comes from having everybody's input into discussions. Helping the team do that, making small improvements to meeting culture and communication can do exactly that. I've spoken about those at length, and the sleeve notes of this episode have a couple of links to Introvert in Business where I discuss them in more detail. But what do you think? Feel free to jump onto the discussion on Facebook at Activate Your Introvert. What question would you like answered on the show? I'd love some more questions like that. Go to activateyourintrovert.co.uk and ask your question.
I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourintrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.